Working Fans Podcast. Cool.
Yep.
All right, here we go. Coming down 3, 2.
You can find negativity in anything, but, like, what's the point? What do you accomplish?
Yeah, wasted energy. All right, everybody, it's the Working Fans Podcast. It's Dave, the producer Joe, and we're here with El Chico Loco, Fast Eddie, Kid Ecstasy, Max Flipper number 8, Mello, is that right? No, Sal Renaro, Salvatore Renaro. You got a lot of names here. Hold on. Sal Del Rio and Sal the Pizza Boy, but most people know him as Sal Renaro on NWA. Sal, how are you?
I don't say how's Sal or how's all those other characters. There's so many more.
Yeah,
all 20 of us are doing too.
He pulled that off a cage match database today, and I'm like, man, these are a lot of nicknames. I'm going to try to get them all in here.
Well, it's really funny because I get the Sal the Pizza Boy thing a lot. I swear to God, it was a one-time, one-off joke that I did that I don't know how that got. That's the one that stuck with me. But I've gotten Sal the Pizza Boy more times than I was actually Sal the Pizza Boy.
Hey, that's just a sign it got over, I guess, right?
I totally did it. I was there live. I felt it. Nobody cared. Not a soul on the planet. It was, well, what it was, back in 1905, when men were men and wrestling was wrestling, Jimmy Ray was doing an angle with Tony Mamaluke at NWA Wildside. And Jimmy took a liking to me for whatever reason, and Mamaluke was, the super strong Italian heel where he hated being, he hated any kind of Italian stereotypes.
Right.
So the whole spot was Mamaluke's got Jimmy in a Fujiwara arm bar. I walk out with pizza. They chant, "Where's my pizza?" He gets upset. Jimmy rolls him up. Then Jimmy and I share a slice of pizza. That was it. It was a one and done. It was never. It didn't have legs. It couldn't crawl. It was just literally nobody ever intended for it to be anything more than I walk out one time with pizza and Jimmy and I enjoy a free slice.
Hopefully you got paid more than that night.
Well, no, I was about to say, that dispelled a lot of those wild side rumors, because that night we got a hot dog, a handshake, and a slice of pizza. So that was
nice.
That was bonus.
Nice. Before I ask you about breaking in, I'm just curious, now that you're with NWA Power and everything, did you have any experience, whether it was watching studio wrestling before or any kind of studio wrestling?
Well, I'm a self-obsessed wrestling nerd. Like, I'm just a super nerd, so, like, even I grew up in California, and we weren't really in NWA territory, but I would see the pictures in the aftermath. And, I was so just enamored with every facet of wrestling. So once I kind of found out the tape trading world and this whole world outside of Weekly, I was all in. So I can't tell you how many hours I've wasted watching, Manny Fernandez and Rick Rude cut promos on the set. And I've watched it all, so the first time I walked in at the first set of tapings at the Georgia Public Broadcasting Building, I immediately felt like Bill and Ted when they showed up to get Abraham Lincoln. I felt like I was there, I was like, it was surreal.
That's awesome, man. Great reference with Manny and Rick Rude, by the way, because I remember them in Rock and Roll Express myself.
100%.
We actually,
so I watched it all. I've studied it all and written about it, talked about it, dreamt about it. So it's been really more so in the last since I think the first takers were November, December. I've had I've had many a moment where I've just stepped back, kind of pinched myself, like, oh my God, this is a real life thing. This really happened.
Yeah, it's wild. It's funny. Talk about like the studio and everything too. Just a quick side note. I think you'd get a kick out of just being a lifelong fan. But we had Ricky Morton on here maybe like a couple months ago, and I told him I grew up watching him, and I can't believe I saw him wrestle twice live, and it was in 2019.
Yeah, no, so you'll appreciate the the Ricky Morton love. I couldn't have enough Ricky Morton love. But if you guys were watching the where he worked Nick Aldis a couple weeks ago.
Yep.
And then post-match, some of the guys spilled out of the locker room to honor Ricky. I wasn't supposed to be a part of that.
Oh, no kidding.
Wow.
No. They were kind of back and forth. Originally it was going to be as many people as possible. And then they were kind of like, oh, we're just going to send a couple of the top, the top 5 baby faces. So like Storm and Drake and Murdoch. And I was like, okay. And so I just happened to be in Gorilla when they started going out. I was like, you know what? It's a lot easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. I'm going.
Damn right.
And I made sure Eddie Kingston was right in front of me, just in case somebody said something. I was like, look at this crazy guy. Eddie Kingston will punch you.
I got the feeling that Eddie's not too far off from that character.
No, that's Eddie. That's just Eddie. But yeah, so I just, I said, it's take a break. There's not one single person said anything negative about it. So I felt justified in doing it. I would take any time to go on a Ricky Morton. He's just the best.
That's all. Hey, how did you break into the business? Who trained you, and how did that come about?
Well, so it's kind of a twofold deal, man. I'm the prototypical don't be this guy. I never had like a true training. So I started going to indie shows in California in '96. There was a place out at San Bernardino Boys and Girls Club. It was 3 blocks from my house called the Inland Empire Wrestling. I had only known TV wrestling and wrestling I read in the magazine. So like this is where I kind of found like this whole world of like guys trying to make it. And one of the guys there was Louis Spicoli. Who was in between shots as Rad Radford and DCW brought.
Yeah.
And so I kind of showed up like way early. Like bell time was 7. I was there at 11. Just way I was so enamored with the business. I'm 13 years old at the time.
Oh wow!
And I was like, I would do anything. I would be more than happy to help you guys do anything. Like whatever. So I'd set up chairs. Help set up the ring, take tickets, pop popcorn, whatever was asked me, I did it. And once the ring was up, I was kind of allowed to get in the ring and roll around, and became buddies with a couple of the guys. And it got to the point where they wanted to try stuff out. And they were like, well, just bump the kid.
Wow.
He's 13. He doesn't have feelings this body yet, Instead of beating each other up. So that's how I learned how to bump, was so I could take moves from God. Fast forward to '98 and moved out to Georgia because at the time I was 15 and I was kind of on my own. I was in between places, and my grandma got sick and my aunt was moving out here, and I was like, well, WCW power plants in Georgia. I'm going to go to Georgia. So that was my grand scheme. I'm going to be a cruiserweight. I'm going to be the cruiserweight champion, and me and Juventud are going to be taking the town. And so I came out to Georgia, and maybe within a month, there was an indie show running at a baseball field around it by my house. So I went and checked it out, and that is where I saw Jason Cross. And I don't know if you guys remember Jason Cross from TNA, but I mean, like I said, this is 98, 99, and this guy's doing shooting star leg drops and front flip on prettiers in front of 40 people in a baseball field, and I'm losing my mind.
Yeah, I want to say he was on the early pay-per-views, right, where they were doing the $10 a week pay-per-views?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I buddied up with him because, like I said, I just saw a man do a shooting star leg drop. Like, yeah, you're going to be my best friend forever. So I kind of buddied up with him, and he was like, well, he was looking for a guy that could take his moves on show. I said, hey, baby, I'll be more than happy. Yes, please. So that's kind of how I broke in. Him, and he had a buddy named John Phoenix. And those are the two guys that kind of, they had a little training facility. And most of the time, like, it was just me, the two of them, and a couple other guys that would go out there and just bump around. And he got me booked on shows because I knew how to take his moves. And that's how I got my foot in the door at Wild Tide. And then from there, it was a lot of learning on the job versus, like, they always used to make fun of me because, like, I got my psychology from television wrestling. And not that that's a bad thing, but, like, that's where I watched wrestling. It was within a month that I had kind of surpassed Jason Cross on the, why don't you do this here instead of here?
Right.
Like, they were like, oh, yeah, you're a savant. And I was like, I wouldn't go that far. I just,
I've watched a lot of this, right?
I've spent a lot of time watching this. But yeah, and then, and from Wildside, I sat under every learning tree I could. So, I mean, like, it was such a weird time in the business, too, because I started at Wildside right as they still had the WCW developmental deal. I started this. So, like, my first night there was February of '01. So the first TV I was there, it was Jindrak and Palumbo. No, Jindrak and Stasiak versus Palumbo and O'Hare they were doing their matches they were doing on the pay-per-view for Super Bowl the next night. This was their, like, let's go through it, see if we got it, Matt.
Wow,
They flew out of Atlanta to be at the pay-per-view the next day. And that was my first night at Wildside. So there was so much talent there. This is AJ Styles was still there at the time, and Abyss was there at the time.
Jeez.
And, plus the WCW talent, Terry Taylor was there, agenting, and all the WCW Power Plant guys. I got to pick and choose from a bazillion different lines, and I'm real fortunate for that. To this day, I still, it taught me that you can never stop learning. So, even at the NWA tapings today, I still, I try to drink stuff in. Like, when I get stumped, I'll go, there's Ricky Morton. He's done everything. There's Robert Gibson. I'm pretty sure he can figure his way out of this tag spot. Let's go talk to them, or whatever. That's how the world got stuck with me.
That's awesome, man. Now, we talked about this before we called a little bit, but you were recommended by Logan Creed of MLW. What's your guys' relationship?
Logan, I had taken a couple of years off. Right around 2010, my second son was born. My first son, I wasn't around for his first 2 years. So when the second kid was born, I was like, all right, I kind of need to be a better dad. So I stopped taking and seeing bookies, and everything was more close to home. And I was feeling burnout anyway, because I'd been going pretty hard for 10 years. So I kind of got out of the business for a little bit, and then I got a job with TNA doing merchandise. It kind of checked all the boxes for me, where I wasn't on air, but I was on the road every weekend, and I was making money full-time through wrestling. But I also wasn't as grueling as, 10 days tours of Japan or whatever. I was usually home 3 or 4 days a week. And that was my whole wrestling. And before shows, I would get in the ring and roll around a little bit, but no matches. Well, when they let AJ go, I kind of saw the writing on the wall. I kind of had a little foresight, said, things are not going to, I don't see us traveling much more. I'm going to leave. So I put in my notice, and I was kind of done with wrestling at that point. It wasn't even a bitter thing. It was, I'm 5'7", 180 pounds. I've done everything I can do. Wrestled in every major ring I could think of. I've traveled the globe. I'm happy. I don't want to be that bitter guy. I was home for maybe 2 months, and I had a buddy who runs a show maybe 30 minutes from me, and he calls me up and says, hey, come do this show. I was like, I'm good, man. I'm happy. Come on, come do this one shot for me. No, I'm good. No, I got a guy I want you to work with. What's it going to take? I said, okay, here's my out. I'll give him a stupid number. He can say no to it. We can both walk away with our heads held high. So I shot him the stupid number. He goes, oh, yeah, that's great. See you on the 20th.
Wow.
I'm like, oh, no. So my then wife, I told her, hey, here's the deal. I got suckered into one spot, but here's the money, and it's 30 minutes down the road. And she goes, oh, well, you need new gear. And I go, wait, that's not how this goes. She's like, come on, you can brother a couple of people get some free gear. I was like, all right, let me make some calls. So I made a couple calls and called Rick Michaels, who I've known forever. And I go, hey, man, I need you just to brother me a set of gear. something easy, basic design. I kind of walked him through what I was thinking. Nothing gaudy. I was like, it's a one-off. I just, it's going to be the first time the kid sees me, blah, 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 blah. He goes, oh, yeah, I'll take care of you. And I go, well, how much you want? And he goes, oh, don't worry about the price. I was like, awesome. And he goes, yeah, just come do a shot for me on the 21st. I'm like, oh, no. And that first show I did for my buddy, long story short, the first show I did for my buddy, Logan was on the show.
Oh.
And he was one of the few guys that recognized, what little name value I had. he kind of buddies with me, and we've been buddies ever since.
That's awesome, man. I was joking with him that he reminds me of Luke Gallows when we had him on too.
Absolutely, no. They are of the same ilk.
Now, one thing I wanted to pull aside a little bit here. We did this with Logan. It's kind of a new thing we're doing, and we might do this in a later show too. But we're trying to branch out, start something new. So we're just kind of challenging people out of their comfort zone a little bit here. We want to see like what else guys are interested in. So besides wrestling, do you have any other hobbies you like, favorite movies, or other things that really spark your interest?
The easy answer is no, but it's not true. But I mean, I'm such a wrestler. Like I said, I'm a wrestling nerd. So,
yeah, I was thinking that when you said that earlier.
yeah, and it's worn off on my son too. But so I collected wrestling figures as a kid, and it's worn off on him. So we go on a lot of the figure hunts together, which is fun. But like my favorite movies, easy. I've played Desert Island a million times. If you give me Anchorman and Ninja Turtles 2, I'll be good. very, very simple, man. I'm talking Secret of the News, not Out of Shadow.
I thought you were going to say Wrestling Road Diaries. That's why I was
No, actually, never seen it.
Oh, yeah?
Seen the movie. Yeah, I lived it, but I mean, I've never sat down and watched the edited version. I think I have a copy of it somewhere in my house. I'm not sure where. Cabana gave me a copy, and this was right around the time I started with TNA, and I kind of had the idea of, so let me get some, let me get like 100 of these things and try to sell them. But I knew TNA wasn't going to clear it. I was like, I'm good. So I got the one copy, and I just never got around to watching it. I've heard good things.
That's funny.
Now, I actually did watch it, Sal, and I had a question for you because when I was researching you, I noticed that the Wrestling Road Diaries, it was taped roughly 11 years into your career. And we're roughly 11 years from when it was taped. So what kind of lessons did you learn in the first 11 years versus the second 11 years?
That's a great question. I think I was fortunate enough to learn, and some of it the hard way, but in my first 11 years that, it's okay to accept change.
It's the hardest thing in life to accept sometimes.
Right.
Absolutely, but just if you look at what wrestling was in 2009 versus what wrestling is today, I mean, it's night and day, but that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's different.
Absolutely.
A lot of the young guys, and it's crazy to me to even have to use that phrase still, but a lot of the young guys that I talk to that are just breaking in, kind of expect me to be, these kids with their flips and their high spots and their, I love them.
Yeah.
I love a good story too, don't get me wrong, but I like it all. I'm a fan of pro wrestling, as a kid, I liked, my dude was the king of the African dream. Spoiler alert, I knew he was an African.
right.
The secret leaked. I don't know how it got back to me. So that didn't make it any less fun for me.
Right.
I'm a big believer if you know what you're getting into, everything's allowed. So there's not one set of rules in pro wrestling. And I definitely think I was fortunate enough to learn that in my first 11 years. And then actually watch the evolution of the business in the second half of it, where I see, oh, no, I was right.
What's funny? I was just talking to someone today, I own a bread business. I deliver bread, and I was talking to a younger person today at one of the stores, and I just talking about the difference in life. Things are just going to keep changing. Now we have more social media that we didn't have, and there's good and bad that comes with that. It doesn't mean everything's all bad. Sure, there's a lot of negativity, but you're also easy to promote and find people, and depends how you use things, I think, a lot of times.
Oh, yeah. No, and it's funny because I'm a pretty positive dude just in general. So you can find negativity in anything, but what's the point? What are you accomplishing?
Yeah, wasted energy.
Yeah, I don't have time for that. Let's find the fun in it, So social media. Well, here's a great example. I was talking to my 9-year-old today, or not today, last night, and he was on my phone talking to one of his buddies. And I could hear him, and I go, all right, man, it's time for you to go. You need to hang up. And he goes, hang up what? And I was like, oh, my God. You literally don't have to hang up the phone anymore.
Right.
You hit the end button. And sorry, I was like, well, you know, when I was a kid, you literally had to put the phone up on something.
Right.
Like we hung up the phone. Like, this is fucking non-existent phrase anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think that younger people wouldn't even get the reference to what it means. They hear it.
Yeah.
I had a question now that you mentioned that you're a parent. Like, being a parent who's a wrestler, are your kids into wrestling?
My eldest hates it. And I think, like, he's 14, but I think he's got a deep-rooted, I wouldn't say hate, he doesn't care. And I think a lot of his not liking wrestling has to do with, well, that's what Daddy went to go do when I was younger. So I didn't have Daddy time. But my youngest son, it's scary how much he is me. Like, I see so much of me in him where, like I said, like, we collect the toys together, but I mean, he's on the ball, man. Like, he smartens me up to things I don't know. Like he's the one, like, I got home one day, whenever it was, I walked in the house one day, and I was like, hey, what's up, man? He was like, worst day. I go, why is that? He goes, they released Luke Harper. I'm like, what? No! What? They're like, what was that thing? They got the wrong one.
Are there any things in wrestling that they're into that you just look at and you go, that's not for me?
Well, I have taken one thing I really love, and it's such a great bonding thing, at least on my end, is because I've got, 20 years under my belt, I can't tell you a time I wasn't watching wrestling, so I'm kind of hardened, and I can get over things real quick. I love to watch wrestling with Jacob, because I love to watch it through his eyes. Like, I know what I like and I know what I don't like. I don't like to give my opinions to him. I like him to give me his opinions to see what he gets into and what he doesn't get into. For example, like Humberto Carrillo. He is a beautiful man, does nothing for me. He's just not my guy. I couldn't care less. It's not a knock on his work. It's not a knock on anything other than I don't care. So I have that feeling. But like when he comes out, I don't like openly groan because I want to see what his reaction is. Because then I can test to see if the guy is getting over or not. A couple of weeks ago, I guess when he returned, and Jacob was just like, "Oh yeah, I forgot about this guy." Oh, and I was like, "All right, you get it." I agree. We're friends.
You know what's funny? I was listening to Chael Sonnen, you might know, who does MMA, and he's been in pro wrestling.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, he was saying that, like, him and Randy Couture would go wrestle with the high school kids sometimes because they would see what they were working on and what was new coming up. And it kind of reminds me of this, like with your son, like you're watching, you can see, okay, what does he like now and what's kind of new? And I think it's a way to keep us young sometimes to have like younger people around us, you know?
You get to see it with
Yeah.
No, and it's like this thing is it's always funny taking him to live events too, because like just his reactions to things. So like we went to one a few years ago and it was King and Braun Strowman. And like I love my kid more for anything other than like he stands by his beliefs. So like Braun Strowman was full boogie babyface at this point. Like there was no question. Like Braun Strowman was as babyface as to get. He's flipping over fire trucks and, juggling Miatas. But my son will remember. He was like, "No, man, I ain't about this news. No, man, he's not a good guy. I remember." so like, he's the only guy in the crowd booing Braun Strowman. But it's not because he didn't appreciate his work or, he's like, "No, dude, you remember the Wyatt family, and I'll never let that go." Or just like with Cesaro. So, like, I've known Claudio. Like, when Claudio first got into Ring of Honor, it was right around the same time I did. And so he didn't know a lot of people. But if you've ever talked to Claudio at length, like, he loves Gasto. Just loves him. And that's something I have in common with him. Because the punnier and the cornier the joke is, the better it is. I just love him. Like the one thing I used to always, like the one joke I always had for him was, "What's orange and sounds like a parrot?" A parrot. But
you popped us.
When Jacob, yeah. So when Jacob got into it, Cesaro was heel. And, I mean, I'm talking, so he's a heel, he's We the People with Jack Swagger. He wouldn't let it go. He would not let it go. Until, it was like a year after he had finally turned babyface. He did 8-Man with the New Day on Raw. And I helped break in Xavier Wood. He's, personal friend, kids call him Uncle Austin, and once Cesaro teamed with Xavier Wood, he looks over at me and he goes, you know what? He might be okay.
That's awesome.
It's always interesting to see what changes a kid's mind or what they see in wrestling, because they're seeing it for the first time. We've been hardened to it over the years.
Oh, absolutely. And, I can't say, I'm so there's some guys that, I'm just infatuated with that I can't help that, before Buddy Murphy, because, he watches 205 Live with me. So, I mean, this is literally, 2 of the 4 viewers that show had. And so, when Buddy Murphy was doing his thing on 205 Live, I was like, this is my dude. I love Buddy Murphy. So, Buddy Murphy is super duper over in the Renaro household. Way before he was a baby face, way before he was on Raw, way before he even had a character. I was like, man, this dude's the good. That was the big Christmas present he got this year. He got the 2 Buddy Murphy figures. And he was like, man, Santa for real loves me. Oh, yeah.
Nice.
So, yeah, I'm not... I try to only put the positivity out there for us. If there's someone I don't watch, I don't try to influence him negatively. When Pete Dunne comes out, I can't help but go, yeah, that Pete Dunne fella, he's a heck of a pro wrestler. I like him a lot.
Well, hey, we had you on for a little over half hour now. I'll just ask you a couple more questions here. What are some of your goals still, now that you're still in the business? Anything else you want to promote after that?
It's crazy because, I've met goals. I heard this real inspirational story, and I can't remember the guy's name, but there was a guy that was in a bomber, in a airplane. He was a fighter. He was over in Iraq. Plane got shot down. Everybody in it died but him. But he was destroyed. I mean, both his legs were mangled. And he was saying that, so he was just left to no devices on this beach. And so what he would do is he had a stick, and he would take a stick and draw a line in the sand and say, all right, if I can just crawl to that spot, I can take a rest. And he would do it over and over and over and over until he crawled to some town miles away. That's kind of the way I look at my goals in pro wrestling now. Where I'm not going to get signed for it. It's just not going to happen, especially since I broke my arm. But if I can just make enough headway to be mentioned, that's enough for me. I'm very happy with. Like I said before, I kind of stepped away in 2013 because I was good. I'm fortunate enough to have the perspective to realize that, even if I don't get that WrestleMania pre-show battle royal spot, I've had a good run. I'm very happy with what I've been able to accomplish. But as far as goals, especially now, with NWA taking off the way it has, especially for me, that TV title I think would look just wonderful at my house. I got a little spot for it that would just look super duper cool.
There you go. I like that.
Yeah, I definitely love to get in the TV title mix. I finally, at the last set of taping, I got to do an on-set promo. And that was like I said, when I walked into the building and saw the stage and the desk and everything, that was immediately I got to do a promo on set. That was my thing. And I finally got to do it at the last set of taping. And that was super cool. I'd like to at least get one more of those. I did it with May, and we had a great time. But I'd love to get involved in an angle where I get to do a by myself on set promo. That'd be super cool. There's a ton of guys there that I'd still love to mix it up with. I've known Caleb Conley since his second match, and I don't think he and I have ever done a singles. So I would love to get a singles match with Caleb Conley. They just brought Matt Cross in, who I've done stuff with in the past, but, I'd love to get in there with him. Ricky Stark, Vicky Dice. I mean, there's a lot of guys, and then obviously, Nick Aldis. Just with the prestige of what the NWA title is and all the hard work that they've done in making that title have some kind of significance again, I'd love to get at least one shot at the NWA World title. Just, that's one of those things that, 20 years from now, I can tell my kids I did it. Whether I won or lose or whatever. Like, oh, yeah, I had a shot at the NWA World title. I think that'd be a cool thing. Like I said, I know those aren't all going to happen tomorrow, but we'll see. I've been fortunate, man. That Power crowd, for whatever reason, loves them some Sal Leonardo.
There you go, man.
Yes, they do. Now, one last question before we have you promote anything. What's been your key to longevity in the business?
I told this advice. I've told it to 100 people, but my whole thing has always been, you need to love pro wrestling because it doesn't love you. Pro wrestling doesn't owe any one person anything. It's going to survive. Pro wrestling will always survive. It's such a good form of entertainment that there will always be some form of pro wrestling. It's not self-reliant on one. It's not reliant on one person. It's a very self-reliant entity. My whole thing is just love it. Find the fun in it, man. If you can't find fun in pro wrestling, I just don't understand what you're doing. That was my thing when I took a step back. It wasn't fun for me because I was beating myself over the head trying to figure out what I was going to do and how I was going to do it. And now I'm so fortunate that I'm having more fun at 37 than I did at 17. And it's because I love pro wrestling. I love it. I love all of it. I love the art of it. I love the behind the scenes. I love the front of the scenes. I just love every aspect of pro wrestling. And that's really the key is, just love it. Have fun with it. Make it your own. Make it, I truly believe, this is the greatest form of art in the world. And, I'm fortunate enough, as a kid, I used to draw Thompson. I would draw the caricatures of wrestlers and Ninja Turtles, basically. And, a couple of my friends liked it, but I knew I was never going to be an artist. But, this is truly a way of being able to express art, and it's such a cool thing, man. And I'm also big on if you get it, you get it. If you don't, that's okay. I've got tons of friends that don't like pro wrestling, and that's okay. You don't have to like it, but I know I love it, and like I said, I've watched it evolve from 1982 to today, and I love it more today than I did as a kid. It's
Preaching to the choir, man. Everything you just said, I talk to people that are negative about things all the time, and I just say, well, don't watch that. And, you don't have to, love every wrestling show, but if you love wrestling, you're going to find some wrestling show you love, or you're going to find something on it you love if you really love wrestling.
Absolutely. Yeah, the thing is, I got that, I broke my arm in January, so I'm out of commission right now. So, I'm trying to relearn how to just be at home, which is harder than any match I've ever had. So I got the pay-per-view. I got the pay-per-view Saturday, and I invited a couple friends over. And one guy was like, "Why would you watch that? You don't even work there." I was like, "Who cares?" But I have friends that do work there. I love pro wrestling, and I promise you, it's going to be good. There's going to be something you're going to enjoy.
Yeah.
If the Young Bucks and Kenny and Adam Page aren't your cup of tea, maybe Cody and MJF, maybe maybe Orange Cassidy's your thing. I know he's my thing.
Yeah, that was something completely different for me, and I loved it. I don't know about you, but the rolling over spot where he just looks like he's legit cracking up at one point, I lost it. I thought this is great.
So good. And this thing is, and it's, because, I'm a huge Neville guy, or Pac. Love Pac. So, on paper, that's such a weird matchup.
Right.
But there's the old fight adage that matchups make, styles make matchups. And, this was, I loved it. that was genuinely, like, this is no disrespect to anybody else on the card, because it was a solid show, top to bottom. It was really good. But Pac and Orange Cassidy was the one I was like, yeah, I'm glad I watched this one.
Just saying.
It was super enjoyable.
I was excited for that match because I'm looking forward to Orange Cassidy versus Suzuki at Spring Break. And this was almost a preview of that joking style versus this dude that could break him in pieces.
It was so much fun. So much fun.
So, Sal, is there anything you want to promote before I let you go?
It's Tuesday, 6:05, YouTube, NWA Power. And again, just talking about styles, man. They have done such a good job. Like, I can't say enough good things about finding the NWA's found their niche. You know, they're not trying to be McDonald's in a fast food world. You know, they're more like an in and out, where like it's not necessarily for everybody. It's not everywhere, but if you like it, you like it. So come watch it. Definitely check out NWA Power 6:05 Eastern on YouTube. You can follow me at Sal Renaro on Twitter. I'm very new to it. I still haven't really figured out all the mechanics of the Twitter world. That was my holdout. My buddies finally beat me to death and told me I had to get on Twitter. So I've done it. I don't know if I've done it successfully, but I'm there. I'm on Instagram at Sal Renaro. No, I think it's Sal_Renaro. And
yes.
You can check out my Facebook at Sal Renaro, RINAZOO. I would do backstage extreme. I mean, how many vowels do I got?
Right. Well, all right, Sal, this was a pleasure. Thank you so much. You're a great talker, a great interview. We love your passion, and maybe we'll have you on again, man. Thank you so much for everything.
All right, sounds great. Yes, bro. Thank you, guys. Find the fun in it, man. Like, if you can't find fun in pro wrestling, I just don't understand what you're doing.
All right, so that wraps us up for this week. Thank you again for listening to the Working Fans Podcast. So as always, you can find us on Twitter at FansWorking. Our Facebook page is Working Fans Wrestling Pod. We have email where you can reach out to us and let us know what you think also. That's workingfanswrestlingpod@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram, workingfanswrestling_pod. And then as always, please continue to listen to us on Anchor.fm, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, all your major platforms. If you're following us on Apple Podcasts, which we are also on now, and YouTube, please make sure you subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. It helps us bring you these podcasts where we get to talk to you and talk with you every week.
Working Fans Podcast. Cool.
Yep.
All right, here we go. Coming down 3, 2.
Working Fans Podcast with AJ and Dave. And we got a special guest today. One half of the former NWA Tag Team Champions and part of the group Strictly Business, Mr. Royce Isaac. Royce, how are you, sir?
Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for having me on.
It's our pleasure, Royce. I think my co-host forgot to mention that also the future Crockett Cup winner for 2020.
Hey.
Just saying.
No, I appreciate that we got to it eventually, because that's definitely on the docket for sure, man. The Crockett Cup's coming up April 19th, so we are in wild card season, baby. I'm ready to have a big year. Obviously, last year Crockett Cup was a coming out party of sorts for the wild cards. So I think this year, onward and upward, we got to take the cup home with us, baby.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about that. Obviously, you're a competitor, you're an athlete. Did I see you training with Josh Barnett?
Yeah, man. So, the cool thing is, living in LA the past 2.5 years now, is you make some pretty cool connections. I met Josh at a suburban fight show. Randomly, it was after a GCW show, they had a suburban fight that ran directly after that I was on. I wrestled KCB, who's a really good East Coast guy for GCW. And after the match, we were just talking and bullshitting. And I think it was one of those things where, we got along. We trained together a couple times now. I have some elbow bursitis I'm dealing with, so I'm trying to heal up and whatever. But it's really cool anytime I get to learn something like a master like that. And it's someone that's had such a storied career. Josh is really, really cool. He actually referred me to the doctor that's helping with my elbow bursitis. So really legit, really good dude. I can't wait to train with him some more. I have a shoot background from my college wrestling days, and it's something that I enjoy, and I'd like to get back to. So.
Well, people talk a lot about legitimate backgrounds, and the fact that you wrestled for Cornell out there in Iowa is absolutely incredible. Any of us that did amateur wrestling know that where you want to be is a state like Iowa or Minnesota, somewhere out there in the heartland where wrestling is God.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's like you either want to be in the Midwest. I think Iowa obviously has a long storied history, and it's gotten to the point now too, especially for high school. And then now with K.L. Sanderson for college, Pennsylvania has gotten really, really good as far as that goes as well. So it's like there's a few really, really good hot spots for people who can shoot really well and whatnot. It's really cool now that Josh has the Bloodsport series that he's been doing, that, you know, he's been able to showcase more like an old school pancrase shoot style for pro wrestling, because I definitely think there's an audience for that. Like, I really enjoy watching that kind of stuff. I'll still go back and watch old pancrase matches and whatnot on and watch them on YouTube and stuff. And so it's definitely a different kind of spectacle and event.
Yeah, no, we're huge fans. We actually went to the Bloodsport where it was Barnett versus Minoru Suzuki, and
shit.
yeah, just a great show. And I'm a big MMA fan too. Like, I just watched, I think it was 248 this weekend.
Oh god, what's his name, Romero versus Adam Saya or whatever.
Yes. The friggin' co-main event, the two females fighting.
The women tore it up, right?
Oh man, that was one of the craziest fights.
They stole the show.
Yeah, unbelievable damage done. Like, I don't know if that might be one of those things they say is a career shortener. It was definitely, it was a crazy fight.
Yeah, you don't have too many of those in you, kind of thing. Yeah,
right.
For sure.
Now, as a competitor, too, I couldn't help but notice this on Facebook. I wanted to ask you, I'm assuming this has to do with your lifting credentials, but maybe you could clarify. Big Bad Deadlift Daddy? Is that your nickname, or is that one of them?
That is my nickname. So, I mean, that all comes from, I'm a huge Scott Steiner fan. And shout out to Scott. I know he's in recovery right now. He had a health scare. But I grew up a Scott Steiner fan. Always been a big fan of Big Papa Pump. I mean, obviously, I deadlift for workout, my own personal workouts and whatnot as well. But even outside of that, one of my biggest moves in my arsenal has always been like my deadlift suplexes, and since that was something that I was kind of getting known for, it just made sense because I didn't want to be like a small booty daddy. I mean, one, I have a big butt, that'd be kind of weird, and two, I didn't want to completely like bite off his style or whatever, but I wanted to pay homage to Steiner and kind of incorporate my own. What would be my take on it? So, Big Bad Deadlift Daddy is how that came into play.
Awesome.
Royce, the first place I got a chance to really see you perform was Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. And at that point, you had more of a almost Scott Steiner look with the bleach blonde hair and the goatee. But did working for Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, did that actually get you used to the studio, which seems more similar to what you're doing now with the NWA?
Yeah, no, I definitely think that style, like, a lot of people don't realize that they have to watch Hollywood. It is filmed in that studio style. I think that really helped me be prepared for what a studio day would be like. I think that, getting to work with various, talented people on the way up there, like, people like Bateman, and Andy Brown, who's still there, is really, really talented. Super beneficial for me. It was definitely, it was the same similar style. And I don't know if a lot of people really get that on their come up in the indies. It's like there's definitely a lot of places where you can get a really good match and some that can help you become a really good wrestler because maybe you're getting 20 or 30 minutes. But especially when you get to TV somewhere or you work for a big company, there might be times you have to realize how to like get yourself over, but only wrestle for 6 to 8 minutes. And Hollywood also really helps with that, with time constraints and hard cameras and all the kind of little extra stuff that they don't always necessarily go over unless you have a really good trainer,
One of the matches that I'm going to recommend people go out and check out there, anybody who's a fan of yours or a fan listening to this podcast right now, check out, I believe it's from 2018, you versus Joey Ryan. If they want to see how good of a skill set you have and how great you are at selling and playing to the crowd, that match, I thought you were absolutely phenomenal. So I hope people go out and check that one out.
I appreciate that. I really enjoyed that match too. I think when Joey really wants to go and do his thing, like people forget he used to be Joey Ryan, the technical wizard. Joey's really good in that too. And, everyone needs a good dance partner, so I got to give props to him as well. Another one, like people like the blood and gore. Me and Bateman had a full rope match last year that's on YouTube in full, so I would really recommend that. And if people aren't familiar with Bateman, he he got signed to Ring of Honor right around the same time that I started really doing stuff heavily with NWA. So it was really cool to have like a really physical, bloody beatdown match with him for sure. So both of those are on YouTube, and I would recommend either one if you're trying to check me out.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up because he's talking about the technical match, you're talking about the bloody match, and now, like, you're in Strictly Business, you're a serious performer, but you also kind of have this different thing going on with Mae Valentine and Sal, and it's interesting. It almost reminds me of, like, and no offense to Sal, like, I don't want to say he's playing George Steele, but, like, it reminds me of, like, the Macho Elizabeth thing, and it's interesting, though, because it's, like, there's more versatility, it seems like you're getting to do in, different aspects of your character now, evolving.
Yeah, no, I mean, I really, personally, I find it a blessing that I've been able to show off more folds in my character and what I can do in more range. I think that only benefits me long term. Like, I hope people can see that and recognize that as well, and hopefully they will over time. I think it's important to not just be one-dimensional. Like, there should be, like, wrestling, one of its greatest attributes to me is that it's like such a variety show that you get so much out of it. And the more that I can contribute to that, the happier kind of I'll be, because I think that, it's like some people, you never know what's going to stick with people. Obviously, there's a lot of people that really enjoy good technical wrestling. There's some people that want to see car crashes and whatever, and there's some people that, like, I remember so many of the mid-card to low-card people from the Attitude Era, and it has nothing to do with anything they were doing in the ring. It was because of vignettes and, promos and whatever the interaction was between them and another mid-card. Like, that kind of stuff can be really memorable, too. And I think if you can show everything, no matter where you're at on the card, and luckily I'm in a place where I'm with Strictly Business where, it's a primo act and whatnot, but you can really show more value for yourself when you are in a setting like that where you can show your range.
Royce, we had on about a month and a half ago, we had a legend and Ricky Morton on, and he gave you one of the best compliments I think that you can give a fellow wrestler. And he said that wrestling you and Tom Latimer was basically like having a night off in the ring. And to hear a legend actually talk about you that way, that's got to be a cool thing. But what were your influences growing up, and what time period did you actually start really following wrestling?
Well, yeah, I just turned 31 in February, so I'm an Attitude Era baby. Like, I came up when, wrestling was really hitting its boom period. I was definitely more of a WWF guy than WCW, but I watched both products pretty regularly. When I was a kid, I liked all the cool guys, all the Stone Cold, The Rock, Mankind. Like a big, obviously, Scott Steiner fan, big Booker T fan, Diamond Dallas Page. All those kind of guys. And then when it comes to, like, my own personal stuff, I kind of try to take from everywhere. I think it's people do themselves a real disservice when you see someone and they're just doing, like, you can tell, oh, this guy is like a huge, I don't know, Johnny Gargano fan, and they're just doing like a cosplay of him. Like, Gargano's great, man. He's one of the best, obviously. He's amazing, but, like, there's already him. He's already doing himself. So, like, you got to find your own style and your own voice and your own self. And if you take a little bit from here, a little bit from there, a little bit of everywhere, you can actually make your own original kind of potion and thing. And I think it's also important, especially for character kind of work, take stuff from outside of wrestling. Like, don't just try to be like, there are certainly elements of like Macho and Liz with me and Myra, especially with almost even the shoot relationship of Macho being paranoid and whatever, but like you can always take from various forms of media and get influence from there. Like, I've always been a really big fan of Jack Burton from Big Trouble in Little China, Kurt Russell's character. I think there's something really, it's an amazing movie, and it's something that really is easily translatable to a face or a heel, for that matter. Where I'm like a big fan of, in the first Mortal Kombat movie, which is like super underrated as far as video game movies go. The second one kind of sucks, and I think that's partly why, but the first one was great. If you look at Johnny Cage's character in there, he's really good at breaking the fourth wall without breaking it too hard, kind of laughing at himself, but then when he needs to be taken seriously, he's taken seriously, because there is that element of, like, wrestling can be ha-ha and can be hokey and can be funny, but no matter who you are, you can never be taken seriously in the ring as a threat. Like, you kind of maximize your ceiling of where you can be.
Yeah, there's a fine line between comedy wrestling and absurdity. And if you make yourself too much of a joke, then you're taken away from it.
Sure, or if you, just not to get too sidetracked, but or if you do make yourself quite a bit of a joke, know when there's the moment that you have to turn it up a notch, really show people, hey, I'm an ass kicker and I'm a serious threat, you have to take me seriously, and then you can go back to your stick and it's fine.
Timing.
I learned years ago, I wrestled, and I was taught by Adrian Street many years ago, because I'm old. But one of the things that was amazing about Adrian was he took that really effeminate character, and it was a character where literally you would think anybody off the street would be able to just whoop the shit out of him. But when it came time to actually perform in the ring, he literally could maul anyone. So it's that finding that fine line and dancing it.
Sure. Or like you look at like Aaron Stevens' early work as like Damien Sandow, he would be very like prim and proper, and like as soon as he took over though and he turned it up a notch, you would see a completely different side of him where he'd get really, really vicious for a second. You'd think, oh yeah, shit, like he might have been popping around, popping circumstance and kind of prancing around and doing his thing, but all of a sudden he got real serious and like, I feel a little uncomfortable now. And obviously, I think what we see, we're just starting to see a little bit of that come out with Shooter Stevens with like the elbow attack that he did to Trevor Murdoch. If you've been paying attention to that as well, but like,
oh yeah,
he's showing that kind of like, okay, yeah, Shooter Stevens is a goofball, but if you mess with him, he can take it to another level and really, elbow you in the face 300 times until you're not recognizable.
I think anybody who learns that Mongolian karate is going to be dangerous, though.
That's the thing, yeah. Right. I'm not sure what the degree of black belt he is at this current time because I haven't talked to him in a few weeks. He might be like in the high 40s at this point.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to backtrack a little bit here because you had talked about some movies, and I have a new segment I'm doing too, and I think you'd be kind of good for it. It's basically just asking you what your favorite stuff is. We do like 5 random quick questions. You can elaborate or you can rapid fire, either way. But I'll start off with favorites. Favorite movie?
Oh, favorite movie. I mean, Big Trouble in Little China is definitely on like the top 10 list for sure. Old Boy and Sympathy for Mr. Revenge are 2 Korean flicks that I really like. They're in the same series. They're by the same director, and they're both these kind of twisted stories of revenge that are really, really good. The Dirty Dozen is definitely on my list. I just gave you 4, so we'll leave it at that.
Awesome. That was a good list. Favorite pizza?
Pepperoni. That's it. I'm sorry. Like, I know that's like really like basic B kind of stuff, but I feel like if you want to have any other meats on there and whatever, like, okay, fine, we can do that. But if it's just me and I'm just eating for myself, basic pepperoni or like double pepperoni or like pepperoni double cheese or like double cheese double pepperoni, any iteration of that is perfect. I don't think there's any, like, sometimes it's like that simplistic masterpiece that's best.
Royce, you're a genius, because I piss my wife off with that every time I go out to get pizza. If she sends me out and doesn't tell me what kind, I'm coming home with pepperoni.
There you go.
Favorite comedian?
Oh man, George Carlin and Dave Chappelle. Oh. I think they're probably like
excellent fucking choice. I actually got to see Chappelle once about 10 years ago. Mohegan Sun.
You managed to get my favorite comedian and his in the same shot.
There you go.
All right. Only 2 more. Favorite song?
That's a really good question.
Or band or musician.
Really big fan of Copyright. He's this underground rapper from Ohio who, I don't know, he still does stuff, but he's like a really good, like, punchline heavy, but also really good at layering and stuff and making songs that actually have really good meaning to it and whatever. And he's been around forever. He's an underground guy. He's fucking dope. So
awesome.
Yeah, Copyright.
And last one, besides yourself, favorite wrestler?
Favorite wrestler, Scott Steiner or Dolph Ziggler.
Oh, very good, very good.
Dolph Ziggler, one of the most underrated wrestlers on the planet, in my opinion.
I agree, man. I agree. I think that there's a few times that he really could have been given the ball and let run with it, but at the same time, it's really hard. Like, he was still a multiple-time world champion, so he had the great Survivor Series moment and all that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he still has had a really, really storied, amazingly long career. It's just someone that I think also he could have definitely done even more. And, it is what it is, man. hats off to him, man. He's a legend.
Yeah. To me, he's got that Mr. Perfect thing where he can't have a bad match, so that makes him pliable to make everybody else look so good.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. I agree with that.
Now, one other question. You're in strictly business, NWA, faction with the heavyweight champion. Obviously, it's not like the Four Horsemen, but it's a faction. It kind of gives me memories of that. Just out of curiosity, hypothetical fantasy booker, if you could put a fourth guy with you, besides, I'm not discounting Camille or anybody, but, besides Latimer and Aldis, who would be another guy you think that might fit in that group?
I don't want to do a disservice to Camille. I think she could beat up most guys out there. So
Agreed.
Unfortunately, I can't give you a good answer on that because I wouldn't, I'd feel like I'd be disrespecting her.
Nope.
100%.
She honestly might be the second toughest in our group behind Nick. Just being real.
Yeah. All right. Camille, it is. Beautiful. Because she's wrestling next week. She's been more of like the bodyguard type.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see where that all goes because Camille's a force to be reckoned with, and I think the fans are really going to respond to that.
And they've done such a great job, I think, with not letting her talk yet, and kind of keep it's so intriguing to me the way they developed her.
I saw a workout that she did with Latimer and with Braun Strowman, and I don't think I would want to try to keep up with her in the gym, to be honest with you.
No, not at all. Not at all. She's a beast.
Crockett Cup's coming up. Is there anything you want to promote out there?
I mean, the biggest thing is Crockett Cup. If anyone's listening and they're not clued into what it's all about, April 19th in College Park, Georgia. Tickets are on sale right now at nationalwrestlingalliance.com/Crockett Cup. If you go on my Instagram, you can find out more information about all that at Royce Isaac. I think right now, I'm not sure when this will air, but I know they're doing some 4-pack deals on tickets and all that stuff. I would definitely get on that ASAP. There's obviously also going to be an internet pay-per-view on Fight TV, so you can order it there if you're worried about traveling around during this time and going down to Georgia. Although Georgia's been fine, Atlanta's been fine from all I can tell, so shouldn't be any problems flying there, I don't think. But
And like you talked about, if anybody listening to this is heading out to the Atlanta area, those 4-packs are actually 4 for $100. So that's only $25 a seat. That's pretty damn good for such a level of wrestling show.
Yeah. They already just on this last week, their Power, they announced some of the talent, and it's I'm not surprised that Bill and Inc. was going to be there, but I'm glad they are because obviously me and Tom want the rubber match there, and I want to say Ray Horace. They have some really good announcements for the matches and for some of the talent that's going to be there already. Some good NWA talent and also some really good Ring of Honor talent. And so it's going to be a good clash of styles, and it's our biggest NWA event yet. And I guarantee NWA's always done a really good job of under-promising, over-delivering on every pay-per-view, every taping that we've done. So there's definitely going to be some sick surprises for all the fans that put the faith in us.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it also. I think the opportunity to get yourself and Flip Gordon in the same ring it could blow the roof off and could steal the show, to be honest with you.
Yeah, man.
Awesome,
that was awesome. Royce, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate everything. We know that you're busy as can be out there, but please keep doing what you're doing, and thank you very much.
Hey, thank you guys. I'm glad this was really easy to organize and nice, good podcast that hopefully the fans enjoy.
And like Dave said, if you need anything, if you need us to put this on ahead of time, to push anything for you or anything like that, please just let us know on Twitter and we'll do whatever it takes to help you out.
And also, too, low-key, this is even, we haven't been planning this, but, you're, maybe the 7th or 8th NWA guy. We love the NWA. We've been interviewing as many NWA talents as we can get. So we're huge fans of the show and product, and we'll do anything to push what we can do. So.
Oh, yeah. That's what's up, man. Yeah, you just definitely tag me on anything on, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever. I'll share, repost, all that stuff. So hopefully we can get as many listeners as possible.
Awesome, man.
Thank you very much, Royce. Have a great night.
Have a great night.
Yeah, see you guys later.
Bye.
This is the ultimate hybrid wrestler, MLW's Douglas James, and you're listening to the Working Fans Podcast. Listen now.
Working Fans Podcast with Dave and Joe, and today we have MLW superstar, Mr. Douglas James. Douglas, how are you, friend?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Very good, very good.
Excellent.
We're big fans of MLW here, man. The first time I saw you, I think, was PCW Ultra. And I was just kind of curious, What got you into wrestling, and what got you kind of started?
So I've been a wrestling fan, since I was a really little kid, and I grew up, loving it. I used to go to, all the events I'm from New Jersey, so I used to go to all the local events, all the Raws, and my dad would come out at 8 to get tickets. But I love going to sports, so I used to play baseball, football, soccer, basketball, play ice hockey. I used to just always doing something as a little kid, and then when I was in high school, I played football and I wrestled in high school. And, with that, with wrestling, I did pretty well, and I transitioned into MMA. I always wanted to be a wrestler. I always wanted to do pro wrestling. I guess for me, I just thought I was, too small, or didn't really have the guts, really, to make that first step, to just do it. And I just went to MMA, and, I went from, jiu-jitsu tournaments to amateur MMA fights to pro MMA fights, and eventually moved to California. And I got to the point where, regional professional MMA is very hard, too. You get paid a lot, things fall through, and I just didn't love it, and I was getting older, and now or never, and I was working on a food truck at the time, and I didn't have much money, and I won $2 scratch-off. I won $200, and the $200 was the additional payment to Santino's, and I found Santino's through Google. And I think I won it, on a Saturday, and on Monday I started. That's kind of how I started. I literally found Santino's through Google. They kind of just jumped in, and 5 months later I made my debut, and that's kind of how I got started. Yeah, a lot of sports, and big fan, and MMA, things like that.
Yo, back it up for a second too. Kind of funny you were saying there's not a lot of money on the regional MMA scene. My ex-wife's brother-in-law, Thane Stimson, he did a couple MMA fights. He actually trained out in California with Team Alpha Male. He had only about 4 amateur fights though, and then he had kids, and he's I can't make this work. But yeah, well, it's funny. He fought MMA. One of the guys he lost to was Rob Font. And Rob Font ended up being in the UFC, and it's one of the, I want to say he's in the top 15, top 10 bantamweights right now. And I'm like, man, if he only knew the guy he lost to was super successful, I wonder if he would have hung on a little longer,
Yeah, no, that's what it is. A lot of it, MMA is a little bit different, but it's pretty similar to wrestling with a lot of its longevity, Put up with the bullshit or getting through those hard fights or whatever it is, Yeah, original MMA, it's crazy. You have to sell tickets, and if you don't sell enough tickets, you don't get paid, and it's the whole thing. Not into it.
Did you train jiu-jitsu with Eddie Bravo?
I did. When I first started doing MMA and all that, jiu-jitsu, I started in New York and New Jersey. So my fight team out there was the AMA Fight Club, the Jim and Dan Miller was from, and Charlie Brenneman from back in the day. And so, when I moved out to California in 2012, 13, I started with Eddie, and Eddie gave me my pony belt. And I used to compete for Eddie, and I was very much 10 kind of guy, and Eddie's awesome. Any kind of negative feedback anybody has towards Eddie doesn't know him. He's the coolest person ever, and super open-minded, especially for something like jiu-jitsu. Very welcoming, and he just wants to do it to be better, and he's positivity, and he's great. He's really good. So.
Yeah, I think Rogan was saying something about that, because obviously he's known for his conspiracy theories and stuff too. But
yeah,
right. But
he's definitely wild. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's a good guy. He's not I definitely think his classes used to be over 2 hours. And I definitely showed up to a class once, and he was just so high. He was talking for an hour and a half on 9/11. I think those things happen, but he's really cool, man.
But yeah, they were saying that was one of the things that made him so good at jiu-jitsu, though, because he was so open-minded that he was constantly learning and trying new things that no one else would do.
Yeah, he's permanently high, So
That's great. As far as in the ring, your style, is there any particular influences, whether it's MMA or pro wrestling?
I would say a little bit of both. I would say a little bit of my style is almost I would imagine a lot of the guys that are wrestling now have a similar mindset, but there's a lot of the guys I grew up idolizing. And I like that shooting style, the more grappling based or hard striking based, high intensity athletic contest. So I was always a really big Shawn Michaels fan. Shawn Michaels was my hero, one and number 2 as a kid. If I really look up to a murderer, but Chris Benoit, Kurt Angle, those kind of guys, Perry Saturn, Eddie Guerrero, those kind of guys are Daniel Bryan, so I really like, that kind of more of a technical style, but I do have an MMA background. I do have, legit fights and tournaments and training, and so I was using that background because being different is good, and, just use the best of my abilities, and I have that ability. So, so we'll do both. I think that kind of works out for me.
You competed in no-gi tournaments as well, right?
Yeah, I compete, pretty consistently all the time, and it wasn't like I competed in like Worlds and stuff, and I won like the SJJIF 2013 Worlds in Long Beach at the Pyramids. I won that. Yeah, and I'm very much like a go all in kind of guy. But I love wrestling, and pro wrestling's the best. So I use a little jiu-jitsu, like in my wrestling, and keep it legitimate.
Now you're in MLW. What would you say? You're working on TV record. Is there any particular promotions that maybe prepared you best for this before you got here?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say maybe like 2 different promotions, right? So I would say one. So when I first started, my third match ever was at Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. So it was TV, and wrestling with TV is different than wrestling in a normal independent show. Whether it's like where you are with the cameras and all those kind of, and like timing and different things, and it's a tool that not everybody gets to learn, and I kind of learned that pretty quickly. With doing that, with like trial and error. I think that has helped me with MLW because I lost with the cameras and being on TV and things like that. But I also think working for companies like PCW Ultra or like Defy, or like these, especially PCW Ultra has been my home for almost 4 years. It's like a big promotion, it's big, events where like 1,000 people, a lot of lights, a lot of like moving parts. Kind of being a part of that, you don't get lost in how, you go to MLW where it's a bigger thing, it's a bigger lights, it's TV, all that stuff. So, pre-tapes and things like that. I think that has allowed me to be more comfortable in that kind of new environment.
I ran across something called, I don't know what promotion this was, I don't even know the background, but it was called Douglas James versus Backyard Wrestlers, Backyard Tribute. What happened there? What was going on there?
Oh boy! All right, actually, not many people really know like the full story.
That's why I was interested.
So here it goes. So I guess, so it kind of went like viral, whatever it was, like 3.5 years ago, a little bit, and then it kind of came back a couple months ago, and then a little bit recently I reposted it, and it got like a lot of positive and negative feedback. Well, basically the story is I was basically booked for over a year in wrestling, barely a year in, now maybe not even, and I was booked to do like a Royal Rumble. The promoter had told me that, a little bit before that I was going to be winning this Royal Rumble. Whatever. And then I get to the show, change of plans, somebody else was going to win, and I was going to, be the last one eliminated. So, whatever. The show was supposed to start at 8. Things started a little bit later. Everyone was going long. I think it was, becoming almost 10:30, and it wasn't even intermission yet. And we were, in East L.A., and it's, really shitty warehouse, not in a good area. And it's getting late, and one of the games on the show, Scorpio Style on the show, getting the limelight. There were 2 people on the show. Yeah, just so I got this idea, because I was supposed to come out 26th out of 30. And I was like, why don't I come out of number 1? And I laughed to the end, because then I lose, whole babyface thing. The promoter liked it, but there was only backyarders in the beginning of the Rumble. I said, it's fine, it'll all work out. And then, whatever, so the Royal Rumble starts. I didn't think anything of it. I just really, I just went in there thinking it was going to all work out. And I would just slowly eliminate these guys because they don't belong there. First thing I did was I drop-kicked one of them. He's no different than anybody else, but he never bumped before. So when he bumped on the mat, he broke his rib.
Oh, jeez.
So when I went to pick him up, he was and I saw you see it kind of in the funny music video. I kind of let him throw somebody over, and his hand he's hurt. And then right when he was hurt, that kind of ruined everything because the idea was I was going to kind of take a back seat to let them kind of do their thing. And then now the veterans in the back are look at he was hurt and telling me go after him,
Right.
Not in a bad way. I'm not if I wanted to hurt them, I would really hurt them.
Right.
I was just trying it was no more different than I got at wrestling training. We used to get beat down for weeks, it's just what it is. And I just kicked them a little harder than they should because they weren't doing they didn't know what they were doing, and that's kind of what it is. And it was just I was just throwing shoot drop kicks all of a sudden, and it just became this thing. And they didn't belong there. It was silly. I would never be in a situation again. But I would do that again because at the end of the day, like, you have to just like, nowadays everyone can get popular through viral videos, and that's all well and good. I understand how it works, but like, I paid a lot of money to train a wrestler. I spent money getting in shape to be a wrestler, and it's a lot of time, and I hate using the word, but it's a lot of sacrifice, and I sacrificed a lot of other things to do this, and it's nobody's choice but my own. But if you're going to come into this, like, there should be some kind of respect to it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's kind of what happened, and it was very much like not planned in advance, just a storm that ends up happening. And
yeah, I should tell you, like, I'm a huge fan. Like, I'm 43 years old, and I've been a fan of wrestling since I was 4, and we've interviewed like Al Snow. We talk about people in wrestling schools. So when I saw that, my perspective was I just felt bad for you. Like, clearly these guys didn't really know what they were doing. So I'm like, I never thought you wanted to hurt him or anything. I just thought, like, how did he get stuck in this poor situation? That's why I wanted to ask you. So
yeah, but I basically put myself in a situation thinking it would, like, one of those, like, when you're like really optimistic about something, and you're like, it'll go great. It'll be fine. It was like that. Sorry, it was like that, and then immediately it was like, oh no, it's not going to work. It's kind of like that situation. So I still kind of deal with a little bit like of slack from that. It's like, I'm not a bad person. I just in the business.
I wanted to take the interview in a little bit of a different direction because I read an article where I heard you talk about getting sober and what it did for your life, as well as the book Zen and the Art of Happiness. So I was hoping you could tell us about the process to getting sober and then why that book was important to you, because I haven't read it, but just based on what I saw in the article, I got to check it out. But tell us about it.
Yeah. I don't know, I guess like a little bit of the rundown was, so, I was in a relationship, I was engaged, and I was wrestling, and I wasn't really happy, I started wrestling, like, in shape, and all that kind of stuff, and I guess, like, all of a sudden I started to, use alcohol and weed as a way to, like, cope with my feelings. It wasn't like having a good time, I was doing it just like cope, and it started to come out of control, and basically I got to a point where I realized, like, if I kept doing this, I'm not going to live the life I want to live. And I'm really a pretty positive person. We all have our things. I like to laugh and joke, have a good time. And I realized I wasn't I wasn't me. I wasn't positive. I wasn't really motivated. And I knew that it had to do with me. It wasn't like other people's fault. It was mine. I had to figure it out. And I remember I was doing like a steel cage match in San Diego. And I was driving out of the show, and I realized I needed to figure my life out immediately. And I called my parents, and they live in New Jersey. And basically, it was like, I think when you have a problem, the hardest thing to do is admit you have a problem. And I admitted that I needed some help, And basically, what I did was I just tried to get out of myself, because a lot of times, no matter what your problem is, whether it's spending too much money or being in a relationship, or I don't know, whatever it is, or eating too much, I don't know, we all have reasons for a lot of these things. Just trying to figure out myself, and so I read this book, and it was almost like a bathroom read, 100-some pages. And it's a little bit of an extreme side of being positive. But basically, a lot of what life is your reactions to action. Something can happen and you can be negative about it, and usually a lot of times negative reactions cause negative feelings, which cause negative results, And the same thing with positive. If you react positively to something, a better positive thing might happen and you get positive results. And it's kind of like a story of that. It's like different tales of reacting positively and what that can lead to being negative, And sure, there are definitely times it can be negative. It's hard, and these times right now, everything's shut down, and so basically I just dove into myself and really fixed my life in a way, and then it was a couple months after I got sober, I dislocated my hip, and it was crazy, and I didn't drink or anything, and I got through it. I came back in 2 months, and it reconfirmed to me the power of positivity. I got very lucky in the injury that it wasn't as bad as it could have been. But I think for me, staying positive is just the proof is in the pudding, sure, there's definitely ups and downs and the roller coaster ride, but as long as you kind of stay on the up and up kind of thing, it's good for the daily check-in, not perfect. As long as I'm honest with myself, I'm good.
A couple more questions. Basically, your experience in MLW.
MLW is great. So for me, it was like a big goal of mine to be able to be there. I try, and then being able to be fine with them. It's really been a dream come true, I'm professional wrestler on national TV, international TV. It's a great experience, everyone's really great. It's a great team, and I really love the product. I think for somebody like myself that comes from like an MMA background, legitimate grappling background, it's a perfect place for people like, Loki, Dave Boy Smith Jr., Simon Gotch, different people like that. Dominic Rini, Thatcher was there, Tom Lowe. It's just, I don't know, it's almost like the perfect place for me. And I'm just looking forward to the future. There's a lot of things happening at MLW. It seems like it's constantly growing. And I don't know what necessarily I've learned. I'm learning about myself and how I need to, continuously get better. I mean, my goal at MLW is I want to be like the face of the company. I want to be the Indian face of the company and take it to new heights.
Normally we'll ask you if you have anything you want to promote. Obviously, we don't know what's going on right in the world right now as far as upcoming shows.
Yeah, it's really crazy right now. But honestly, like if you could, social media, follow me at Douglas James Pro on Twitter, and Douglas James Pro on Instagram. And then, just, I don't know, find out the high spots and different kind of streams and different YouTube channels of wrestling and just support everybody you can. And I know money's tight for everybody, so you don't got to buy my merch, but just try to, keep wrestling alive and stay positive.
Do you have a pro wrestling tees store that people could visit if they want?
I don't, but I have a store. It's called DouglasJames.StoreNV, StoreNVY.com. And it has over 10 shirts on there, like coffee mugs and hoodies and stuff like that. So. Right, yeah, April 18th got canceled, so hopefully they're on in May, and it's just, it's a crazy time, but I think, we're all in it together,
Damn right.
We're all dealing with this, not like one person, so.
Awesome.
Excellent, thank you very much.
All right, guys, have a good one.
You as well, man. Thank you.
You too.
All right.
All right, fans. Today we've got Matt Koon. He's here straight from Total Engagement on MLW Radio. He's the man responsible for the musical productions for StarCast, All In, The Tony Schiavone Show, Bruce Pritchard, Eric Bischoff, and he's a former host, Why It Ended. You can find him on mattkoon.com and also totalengage.net. So without any further ado, here's Matt Koon.
Matt, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. It's a pleasure to be here, guys.
Awesome, man. So, Matt, I have a two-part question. I know you originally from the intros with Something to Wrestle and What Happened When and how you were a part of that. I'm wondering, how did you break into the wrestling / podcast business? And did you know Conrad Thompson before this, or is that part of how this all worked? I'm just kind of curious.
It's a funny thing. I'm a music teacher. I own a music business, and that's what I do. I'm a musician, and I'm a big wrestling fan, obviously. And I discovered podcasts. I followed Conrad on Twitter, and he said, hey, I need a song. And I hadn't created music in a while, and I couldn't find the song for him, but I DM'd him, and I said, hey, I can make you this song. He said, go for it. So I made him the song. It was an instrumental version of the Akeem song that I just did exactly like it was done. And then I started giving him more music and doing research for the show. And then him and Bruce called me one day and said, do you want to do the theme song? I said, sure. And apparently people liked what I did. I started producing the shows, meaning, they gave me the raw audio and I did everything to it. And I did not know Conrad before, but he's become one of my best friends. I talk to him pretty much every day.
That's awesome, man.
Now, what kind of issues do you have, or have you had editing the show? Because I produce this show, and I'm new to the editing sound game, so I find it to be a challenge sometimes. How do you find the whole editing process?
Well, with Bruce's show and Tony's show, they present a particular challenge in that they're 3 hours long. And so that does present an issue as far as computer power. But I'm a musician, and I'm someone who records music in my own house. So I'm kind of overqualified in a way to edit podcasts. It is something I've been doing for years. I've been in front of a computer editing audio for 20 years.
Wow.
So editing one track, which is as opposed to 20 tracks and then mixing them, and all that. It's a little bit easier for me just because I have a lot of experience with it. I would say that it's something anybody can learn, but there is a learning curve to it. And I think that's why I took to it so quickly. It's just because I'm a musician. I've done it a lot. And I like wrestling, and editing's easy for me, and I also enjoy it. So I guess that's the answer. It's not that hard for me just because I've done it forever.
I hear you.
I think it's awesome what you've managed to do, Matt. The fact that you took two passions that you love, wrestling and music, and are able to tie them in and make them work so well together. We look at a rich history of wrestling right now, all the way back to the Freebirds and Texas wrestling and stuff of that nature, and how important music has been to wrestling. You look at the Road Warrior pop when people would, and all of a sudden you hear Iron Man, and you're just absolutely going nuts and berserk for the crowd. And now you've done that for Conrad shows, where we're all fans of, obviously, the podcast genre, and we've been to the live shows for Tony, for Bruce, and to this day, when we hear the theme song for Bruce's show, it gets a pop out of us, and that's because of you.
I appreciate that. And to be honest, I don't work on his shows anymore. I do it time to time. Like I did Arn today because he needed it done, and I did the 83 Weeks Best Of. But generally speaking, the person who does the show is JoJo Feeney, who is on Keeping It 100. He does an awesome job. And yeah, for me, putting music with wrestling, it goes hand in hand. I think one thing I like about NXT is I think the music is fantastic. And going back to the Freebirds, for me as a kid, someone who's always connected with his music, when I think of Kerry Von Erich, I think of Tom Sawyer. If I think of Kevin Von Erich, I think of Stranglehold. If I think of Chris Adams and Gina Hernandez, I think of Bad to the Bone, all the way through, the Mr. Perfect theme, or, even those Jimmy Hart themes in WCW, the Jim Johnson themes, and the CHOS guys who did a lot of the things WWE the last few years. I'm just honored to be part of that tradition. I've gotten to do a little bit of wrestling music. I did the theme for Chelsea Green for All In, and I hope to do a bit more of that.
Wow, that theme for All In was fantastic too for Chelsea Green. Dave, who is Dave is one of my best friends on the planet, similar to the relationship that you have with Conrad, where you guys have built into a heck of a friendship. Dave has a deep love of all things music when it comes to wrestling, and can probably tell you the theme song for just about any wrestler, especially WWE.
Well,
he gets angry at me because I bring up the WCW soundtrack.
Yeah, the Slam Jam album was trash. But Matt, on another note, I was going to actually ask you, what are some of your musical influences?
I'm in my 40s, and I'm a guitar player. I play everything now. I teach everything. I've taught 17 different instruments, but I still think of myself as a rock guitar player. So Zeppelin, Zeppelin is a big. Guns N' Roses. I love Beatles and Paul Simon. And I try to stay current, too, because I teach kids. I teach teenagers. So I stay current on what kids are listening to. I was lucky enough to be the musical director for a production of American Idiot here in Richmond. So I like Green Day a lot. I have a lot of respect for what they do. I try to take as many influences as I can into music, but you got to have your own thing too, and I guess my own thing is kind of born in that, Led Zeppelin meets, Lenny Kravitz type groove rock thing.
Awesome, man. I was kind of wondering, how do you feel about a lot of the funds being cut out to some of the arts and stuff too? That's got to hit home for you then.
Say that again. I'm sorry. Say that again.
Oh, a lot of the funds that are being cut to the arts and music programs right now. I imagine that's got to be tough to see.
Well, it's good for me because I do private lessons. So I have a school where. See, I don't work for the school. I used to do these pits where I would play guitar in a play or something, and all the other people in the pits are these college-educated music professors. I'm self-educated. But they would all come to me and they would say, Matt, how do I do what you do? Because I have 150 students a week, and I teach, I have employees that were my students that are now my teachers. And I'm putting in, instead of 20-hour days, I'm putting in 5-hour days now. And it's a really cool thing to do things on your own terms. So for me, I'm not affected by school budget cuts as much as I'm affected by the economy. If people have extra money to spend on lessons, I'm all good. The music business is kind of running itself now, which is why I have so much time for podcasting.
Now, Matt, being a fan of music, with popular music now almost running into a very middle-of-the-road sound, electronic, almost poppy. There sounds like a absence of instruments. How do you feel about that as a musician?
I think you have to embrace it. I think you have to embrace all the changes in music, and I think probably throughout history, from the very beginnings of music, people have said, music's not what it was. Because the reality is, just like wrestling,
Right.
the greatest music we've ever heard in our life is the music we grew up listening to. And usually the greatest music we've ever heard in our life is the music our parents played when we were kids. And when you hear new stuff, it's like, what the hell's that? As a musician who wants to be current and wants to be relevant, you have to embrace all these things and find things in them you like and realize that it's a part of the history of music to say, you know, the Elvis fans hated the Beatles and the Beatles fans hated Led Zeppelin, you know, and the Led Zeppelin fans hated Boston, you know, Boston fans hated, you know, Metallica, you know, and Metallica fans hate Panic at the Disco. And it's just part of the tradition of wrestling or of music. So I don't necessarily believe that music is on a downturn. I just think, much like AEW or much like wrestling, in a lot of ways, it's just not for us. You know, it's not for it's for the other people, the younger people.
That makes sense.
I agree 100%. I grew up a big Beatles fan because my father was, and one of the things that he loved about the Beatles was the fact that the band that they started out was not the band that they finished at, that they continued to evolve. And now I'm going to swing it around to wrestling with that. Wrestling continues to evolve. And people from my heyday or people from the generation before us who grew up on Bruno Sammartino sometimes struggle with watching some of the modern wrestling because what they say is everything's high spots now, or they're not telling a story. Or I can remember even when I was learning to wrestle in the 90s, that it was, oh, you got to slow down. You're not actually working to the crowd. You're not telling enough of a story. And now those same wrestlers from the 90s are doing it to this generation. So it's once again that tie into music is just huge because it evolves the same way. Is there any wrestlers you see today that you feel fit into any generation? Sorry, that was a long question.
So you could plug any wrestler from today in any generation. Well, I mean, the first one that comes to mind, of course, is Chris Jericho, who's someone who's evolved over the years, you know, and it's a rare case. I think you could put Cody Rhodes in any generation. I think he would probably have a different role depending on the generation he's in, but you look at the kind of over babyface he is right now, you know, there's always a need for that. If you think about WWE guys, you know, you get big guys. Braun Strowman could have fit in the 80s easily. Roman Reigns probably could have fit in the 80s easily. Big guys kind of translate to that. I think the younger or the smaller guys now, like there would not be jobs for the Undisputed Era in 1988. You know, there would not be jobs for them. Rey Mysterio and the Nitro Cruiserweights really broke down the barriers for everybody, and followed by the TNA X division, where they brought in a lot of smaller guys. So I'd say probably bigger guys now you could plug in the olden days. But you know, like there probably would be no place for Joey Janela in the 80s or 90s. But I don't think that's necessarily a good thing.
Right, and then you would end up with a guy like MJF, who, because of his size, unfortunately, in the 80s probably would have been shoved into a managerial spot or something of that nature.
Well, there's always outliers. But even, you're right. I mean, maybe MJF's that good where he wouldn't have been. If you think of someone like Roddy Piper, who he's compared to a lot, Roddy Piper was smaller than Hogan, but he wasn't small. Like, he was like 6'1", 6'2", he was 240 pounds. He was a big freaking dude, you know? And MJF is not a big freaking dude. I've stood next to MJF, and, you know, MJF is like 5'10", 5'11". It's a different world now. And you're right. I think, for me, I don't get so bogged down with the size, because when you have the size, you have the steroid thing. And even back in the day, some of the best workers, like some of the ones I've mentioned in world class, like Chris Alexandro Hernandez, or even, you know, Bobby Eaton or Dennis Condrey, Arn Anderson, weren't necessarily the biggest guys, although I think all of those guys are probably 5'11" or taller.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of that also is the difference between the WWF in that time period and the NWA, to be honest with you, that the NWA focused a little bit more on the workers with medium size, whereas the WWE basically was, all right, who's the biggest guy that we can get to face Hogan? And so it made a little bit of a difference.
Right, but who made money? Like, For me, I was more of a Crockett guy than I was a WWE guy, although I was very much a WWE guy. I just loved wrestling. And I lived in California where I could watch everything, you know. So, but obviously Vince's formula worked, you know, the guys, you know, and even if you had a smaller guy, Orndorff or like Randy Savage, we're talking about 6'1", you know, still 235, 240 pounds of pure muscle. You know, all those guys are bigger than Ric Flair, you know, and Ric Flair, I love Ric Flair, but I guarantee if you compare Hulk Hogan's house with Ric Flair's house right now, you'd rather have Hulk Hogan's house.
Oh, yeah. One of the things that we joke around about on the podcast is that when I was starting off in the 90s, I'm 6'3", and I'm 275, 280 pounds. And I was basically a medium-sized guy when I was starting off. Compared to now, if I go to an independent show, I'm like yourself, I'm in my 40s. And when I go to an independent show just to watch a show or to hang out, I'm larger than most of the talent that's working that show now. So it's definitely a different ball game than it was in that time period.
Dude, you ain't kidding. Like, I do some commentary gigs with my buddy Johnny Fairplay. I don't know if you know Johnny.
Yeah.
And he's a Survivor, and he did TNA stuff. But I did a commentary gig, and backstage, you know, the locker room, the main event was Falapa, who's like a giant Samoan guy. And then another guy named Corey, who was a big guy, who was about the same size. These are big, giant men. I am so much bigger than both of those guys. I am just literally, I'm taller, I'm fatter, I'm bigger. I'm way bigger than, like, I'm 6'4", you know, and I weigh over 300 pounds. So it's remarkable to me that, you know, when I do things like, and I've gotten to work with StarCast, and I've had a lot of interactions with a lot of great wrestlers, but driving and hanging out with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, you know, those guys are big as hell, you know, compared to some of the guys we have now, or even a guy like Booker T or a guy like Rikishi. These are giant men. And today, it's the size thing is real, but I'm not sure how important it really is.
Now,
me, you, and Conrad could show up at an independent show and be the super machine.
Oh yeah. Conrad. I'm a little taller than Conrad. I'm about as heavy as Conrad, and we're giant men. And you know, sometimes it's really remarkable, right? When you run into wrestlers, even ones you knew when you were a kid, and you go, "Oh, Sid Vicious isn't that tall," or you know, the one that got me was One Man Gang. I'm like, I'm taller than One Man Gang. What the?
Wow.
Well, you know? even Hogan.
He's like
even Hogan, if you remember when we were kids, they tried to put him over as 6'6", 6'7" on those cards. And any of us that have ever seen him in person know that he's nowhere near that height.
Yeah, and that's when you meet a guy like, I got to talk to Kane backstage of the Hall of Fame. You know, Kane is about 6'5", 6'6". Like Drew McIntyre is a gigantic human being. That is one big dude. He's like 6'7", legit, like just ridiculously big. And then you see a guy like Kane who's like close to my height. You know, and it's kind of informing.
Now, Matt, I was going to ask you, what's it been like working with a couple of charismatic personalities like Vince Russo and Robbie E. when you were on podcasts with them?
Well, you know, we talked about how I was a music guy and I was a producing guy, and I went to Conrad's house, the infamous Conradison, and I was just in the area. There's just me and him, and he mentioned, he's like, "Man, you're going to host a podcast." I'm like, "What are you even talking about? I've never been on radio. I've never done anything like that. I've never done voice stuff or anything." Of course, a lot since then. And you know, a few months later, I get a call from Terry Runnels. "Hey, I'm looking for a podcast host, and Conrad gave me your number." I'm like, "Well, okay." I was like looking to get in. I'm like, "All right, cool." And that I interviewed Robbie E. on that show, and I had no desire to interview Robbie E. You know, I had no interest in Robbie E. And he was great on the show, and he called me 2 weeks later. He pitched this idea for Why It Ended, and I said, "Let's do it." And that was great. Robbie E. is an amazing personality, an amazing human being. We had to quit the show because he got signed by NXT, and he's been at NXT since then. And he is a special talent, a go-getter. And then things beget that. On Why It Ended, I got to interview Vince Russo. And I thought, I'm going to take a different approach with Vince Russo than anybody else. I'm going to confront him on everything, but I'm going to be like super polite about it. And I'm going to be super like, "You're not a jerk, Vince Russo. You're not an asshole. Can I curse on your show?"
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'm like, you're not an asshole, Vince Russo. I'm just going to confront you. I'm not going to be fearless about how I approach it. And like a week later, Vince Russo's like, I need a Conrad. I want you to be my Conrad. And so I'm like, all right. So working with Vince Russo is exactly like you probably think it is. Vince Russo is exactly the person who he says he is. He's exactly the person he reveals himself to be. He's a good guy. He struggles. He has trouble with people crapping on him all the time. He brings on a lot of stuff himself. He's not the most self-aware guy in the world, and he's very defensive, and some might say justifiably so. Not hard to work with on a professional level at all. Like, it was easy to work with Vince. He was great. We got along really good. But some of the peripheries around him, his fan base and his kind of reluctance to kind of take care of that fan base, made me know that the audience is small, because people don't want to be part of a culture that they hate, and so it wasn't for me. And also I got to work with Medusa. I did a podcast with Medusa for a few weeks. That also wasn't for me. Luckily, I don't have to do this for a living, so I can pick and choose what I do. Still friends with all these people, Dutch Mantel as well, and Johnny and Robbie E. And I decided that I was better off working by myself, and it's worked out really well with Total Engagement. And it's crazy because I'm just a fan, just like everybody else. But I have a lot of cool stories, and I have a viewpoint. I'm kind of fearless in a way. And I also have a great mentor in Conrad, who gives me great advice on how to be successful.
I'm subscribed to Total Engagement, and I can tell you as a fan of it that your stories and the way you connect with the audience is outstanding. And it's one of the reasons why we wanted to have you on, was because, quite frankly, anything that we can learn from what you're doing is going to help us greatly in this podcast.
Well, I'll tell you that the number one thing is, you want to be different. And then the other thing that's just as important is you have to realize the podcast isn't for you. The podcast is for other people. If you're not doing a podcast to be successful, then you're just doing it for fun. And I'm doing it for fun, but I want to be successful in what I do. So I keep in mind the people listening. And I keep in mind this is not for me. Like Conrad told me the Paul Orndorff show I did, which is, he said, the greatest show I ever did. I edited all this this audio together, and I created the story of the Orndorff turn. He goes, okay, it's the greatest thing you ever did, but no one's going to listen to it. You did that for you. You didn't do that for downloads. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. So the advice I would give is just think about what the market needs. Throw your passion into making the podcast successful and how to be different. Why it ended was different. Total Engagement is different. It's every day. It's 10-minute shows. No one else was doing that. Now there's a few that are doing it. And just being different, and also being credible with your audience. Like, I don't tell anybody I'm anything but a fan. When people say, oh, you've done this or you do that, I just go back to I'm a fan. And I think that connects with people as well.
Thanks.
How's it, being a teacher and doing a podcast? Is that a difficult thing to balance with everything, or?
It is. I'm not good at it. I'm terrible at it. I don't sleep a lot. I don't manage I'm a musician, so I'm a creative. So I don't manage my time particularly well. I don't make great decisions about my time management, but I also can work long hours. Like I slept 20 minutes last night just because of things happen, where I had to do some work. I cut a couple commercials for Conrad, and I had to do some stuff for my podcast. I know I'll catch up on sleep, but it is hard to balance. I'm not good at it. But I don't know anybody who's successful that doesn't deprive themselves of sleep.
I can totally relate to that. I have this business where I deliver bread. I get up at like 2 a.m. every day, and that's the time I leave my house and get back in the afternoon. But I've learned that you can go without sleep.
Oh, man. When I was building my business, man, I was a guy in a music school, in a music store, in a room that was 6 by 6. And to take that into a place that at one time had 2 different store fronts, now I have 1 storefront where I have 9 lesson rooms, and that took a lot of work hours. That's what it took most of anything, is work hours. And to do that, you don't sleep, and you have to dedicate yourself. I make my podcasting a priority, I make my work a priority, I make my son a priority. And other than that, everything else is kind of second place.
So you're a parent. Do you kind of monitor some of the wrestling and stuff he watches, or is that not an issue?
Well, luckily he's 17 now.
Oh, there you go.
And I'm also I guess you call it a halftime parent. We have split custody ever since he was 10. And this has been a journey we've done together. I doubt I'd be doing wrestling podcast if not for Matthew. Because when you know, when you're a guy, and I'm a full-time dad, I've worked with kids for 25 years, so I know kids, but when you're with your kid all the time, and you're responsible for them, there's nobody else. You have to figure out what to do. And I'm like, you know what we're going to start doing? We're going to start going to WrestleManias. You know, fuck it.
Yeah.
I'll spend the money. I've always wanted to. And so we just started going to WrestleManias. We started going to these things, and Matthew loves wrestling. I don't mind him really watching anything if I'm watching it with him. At 17, he can pretty much watch what he wants, and he's the one who told me, hey, Dad, there's this thing called GCW. You got to check it out.
Oh, yeah.
He's the one who told me, hey, there's this guy, Orange Cassidy, you have to know about. He told me about that like in December, about Orange Cassidy. And next thing you know, Matthew and I are friends with Nick Gage, and we're, it's a fucking weird world. And, yeah, Nick Gage is my favorite, by the way. He's like my favorite person.
Oh, that's awesome. He's a really good guy. That's cool.
I'll tell you a great Nick Gage story. Have you ever seen Nick wrestle? You ever been to a show?
Yeah. I actually went to a match up and beyond wrestling up here in the Northeast, and a thumbtack match with him and Ricky Shane Page. I still had him in my shoes when I was leaving the show.
So he does this thing when he comes out, and I interviewed him. We had met, and I drove him around, and we became close, and I'd say we're friends. And he met Matthew. He knows who Matthew is. Matthew's 17. He's about 6'1", but he's about 145 pounds. And Nick Gage does a thing when he goes out to the crowd where he will bum rush the crowd. He will just go out there and throw chairs around and shit, right?
Yeah.
And so Nick Gage is out. We're at the front row at the GCW thing in Chicago, the last one. And he looks and he sees me. He doesn't acknowledge me. He sees Matthew. And he gently pushes Matthew aside. And then he just bum rushes the crowd. It was the coolest thing I ever seen. I wouldn't notice it unless you knew it. But he was like, I do not want to kill this kid right now.
That's awesome.
Literally just gently pushed him aside and rushed the crowd. Yeah, Nick Gage is my favorite person. He's great.
That's awesome. Matt, so we're going to try and wrap this up. We appreciate all the time that you've given us today. If you could do us a favor, if you have anything that you would like to plug, please go ahead and plug that now. And then after you're done with that, if there's any way you can actually do a little soundbite for us and for the Working Fans podcast, we'd really appreciate it.
Absolutely, no problem at all. You can listen to Total Engagement every single day on the MLW Radio Network, or go to totalengage.net or any podcast platform, though. Just look up Total Engagement, Matt Koon, Koon. Daily dose of wrestling, your wrestling fix every single day, from one fan to the other fans. And also, November 8th and 9th, I'll be at Starcast in Baltimore. If you're a wrestling fan of like early 90s WCW, it's going to be the place to go, and you don't want to miss it. Or if you're an AEW fan, you don't want to miss it either. Tons of live shows, or you can order it on Fight TV as well. And make sure to support Starcast, because that's my buddy's show, and it's
Guys, thank you for listening to the 531 here on YouTube this week. If you like what you hear, you can always find us on Anchor FM, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, and on the Apple Podcast, where you can subscribe and also give us a 5-star rating. We appreciate you listening. We want your feedback, 531, and if you agree with us, if you disagree with us, we also want you to let us know, and let us know what your 531 would be. Come up with a top 5 and let us know, and we'll tell you why you're wrong. And in order for us to do that, please contact us on Twitter. We're at Fans Working. Facebook page, Working Fans Wrestling Pod. Email workingfanswrestlingpod@gmail.com. It's very important that you actually contact us on these platforms, because we want this to be your interactive place to talk wrestling.